The first bell rang at Hawthorne High School, a weathered red brick building that had stood on the outskirts of Salem, Massachusetts, for nearly a century. On this cold April morning, gray clouds hung low, swallowing the sky. The air smelled of wet pavement, and a biting wind swept across the courtyard, rattling the flagpole in front of the main building. Inside, nervous students shuffled toward the gymnasium, where the state college entrance exam was about to take place. The test had been postponed twice already due to administrative errors, though nobody seemed to know exactly what those errors were. Some whispered it had to do with the school's crumbling infrastructure. Others said there was something cursed about the old gymnasium. Most dismissed those rumors, but not Ethan Blake. Ethan, 17, tall but lanky, with messy dark hair and hollow eyes from too many sleepless nights, sat at the edge of the bleachers clutching his admission slip. His stomach churned. It wasn't just the exam anxiety, it was the school itself. He had been transferred to Hawthorne High only 6 months ago, and something about the building had always unsettled him. The hallways smelled faintly of mildew, as if the walls themselves were damp and rotting from within. Lights flickered even when bulbs were replaced. At times, Ethan swore he heard footsteps echoing behind him, though the halls were empty this morning. As he rode his bike to the exam center, he couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was waiting for him. He tried to ignore it. After all, this exam could decide his future. He needed a scholarship to escape Salem, to escape this decaying town that felt stuck in the past, weighed down by old stories of witches, fire, and blood. The gymnasium filled with students. The long rows of desks, arranged with military precision, stretched across the hardwood floor. Each desk bore a freshly sharpened pencil, a blank exam booklet, and an answer sheet. Overhead, the fluorescent lights buzzed faintly, their glow sickly and uneven. At the front of the room stood Mrs. Kearns, the proctor. She was an older woman with steel gray hair pulled tight into a bun, thick glasses, and a pale face that looked almost waxen under the lights. Ethan thought she looked less like a teacher and more like a corpse someone had dressed up for a wake. "Silence, please," she said, her voice thin but sharp enough to cut through the restless murmurs. "Once the exam begins, there will be no leaving the room. You have 3 hours. Begin when instructed." Ethan swallowed hard. The clock on the wall ticked to 9:30 a.m. Mrs. Kearns' eyes swept the room, lingering on Ethan longer than felt normal. He looked away, unsettled, and opened his booklet when the signal was given. The first questions were easy enough. Vocabulary, reading comprehension, things he had drilled endlessly. He forced himself to focus, though his pencil shook slightly. In his hand, 30 minutes passed. Ethan had answered 4 questions in the essay section. When he finished his 5th, he paused to stretch his fingers, and that was when he noticed something strange. The words he had just written were gone. He blinked, leaning closer. His neat handwriting, the entire response to question 5, had vanished from the page. Only the 4th answer remained. Confused, Ethan flipped the sheet over. Nothing. He checked his watch, 10:05 a.m., but when he glanced at the clock on the gym wall, it still read 9:45. Time wasn't moving. A prickling sensation crawled down his neck. He glanced around. The room had grown disturbingly quiet. Too quiet. Not a cough, not a shuffle, not even the scratch of pencils. Every other student was hunched over their desk, writing furiously, but their movements were mechanical, unnatural, as though controlled by invisible strings. Ethan's chest tightened. He opened his mouth to say something but froze. The boy 2 rows ahead suddenly jammed his pencil into his palm. Blood welled instantly, dripping onto his paper. He didn't flinch. He just kept writing, his blood smearing across the answer sheet. Ethan's throat went dry. He glanced to his left where a girl was dragging her nails across her desk, harder and harder, until one nail bent backward and snapped off. She didn't even scream. Across the room, Another girl began tapping her head against her desk, lightly at first, then harder, until the sound of bone hitting wood echoed through the hall. Ethan's stomach turned. His hand shot up. Mrs. Kern's butt. When he looked at her, his blood froze. She was staring directly at him. Her mouth stretched slowly into a smile wide, far too wide. Her lips cracked, splitting as she grinned, and then, with deliberate slowness, she began to peel her own cheek open with her fingernails, dragging the skin back until the pale muscle beneath glistened under the light. Ethan's heart slammed against his ribs. He stumbled back in his chair, his breath coming in gasps, and then the lights went out. The gymnasium was swallowed in blackness. Screams erupted, not normal screams, but shrill, inhuman wails that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Ethan fumbled for his desk, his breath ragged. The air thickened, heavy with the stench of burnt flesh. Something brushed against his leg, cold, wet. He jerked his foot back, but then a hand clamped around his ankle. He looked down. Dozens of pale charred hands were reaching out from beneath the desks, clawing at his legs, dragging him down. Ethan screamed. The last thing he saw before the world went white was Mrs. Kern's face, inches from his. Her eyes glowing like hot coals, her voice whispering in his ear, "You shouldn't have. Come here." Ethan jolted awake with a gasp. His eyes darted around, chest heaving, as his blurred vision cleared. The gymnasium was gone. The rows of desks, the scratching of pencils, the burning stench, was all gone. He was lying flat on the cold tile floor of a dimly lit hallway. His cheek throbbed where it had pressed against the ground. Fluorescent lights hummed faintly overhead, flickering in and out, leaving the corridor in pulses of light and shadow. Ethan sat up too fast and winced. His head pounded as if he'd been struck. What the hell just happened? He muttered, under his breath. The last thing he remembered, those burning hands dragging him down. Mrs. Kern's whispering he touched his ankle. It still burned where something had gripped him. His fingers came away with a faint trace of ash, black smears on his skin. A noise jolted him, footsteps. Slow, deliberate, echoing against the walls. Ethan scrambled to his feet, backing against the lockers. The hallway stretched long and empty, lined with rusted green metal doors, most dented, some broken, entirely off their hinges. At the far end of the hall, a shadow moved. "Hello," Ethan's voice cracked. "Who's there?" The footsteps stopped. Silence. Ethan's throat tightened. He glanced around for an exit. Behind him, the corridor split one way leading deeper into darkness, the other toward a set of double doors, marked exit. He rushed to the doors, slammed his shoulder against them. Locked. The overhead lights flickered again, then cut out completely. Darkness swallowed him. And then, from the blackness, whispers. Dozens of voices, layered over one another, rising and falling in a sickening chorus. Ethan clamped his hands over his ears, but the whispers weren't outside, they were inside his head. "You shouldn't be here. How test never ended. Stay with us." Ethan stumbled backward, his breath ragged. His hand brushed against a door handle. Desperate, he yanked it open and stumbled inside. The room was pitch black at first, until the light from the hallway flickered back on just long enough for him to see. Rows of desks, exam papers, scattered across the floor, charred blackboards, cracked and peeling, and the smell burnt fabric, burnt hair, burnt flesh. "No," Ethan whispered. He knew this room. This was the gymnasium, but smaller, older, abandoned. He stepped inside, trembling. The walls were scorched black as if a fire had gutted the place years ago. Ash clung to the ceiling. Every desk bore deep scratches, claw marks gouged into the wood. On one desk near the front, letters had been carved so deep the wood had splintered. "We never left." Ethan's knees weakened. He gripped the desk to steady himself. His hand touched something sticky. He pulled back, his palm was red. Blood. His breath quickened. No. behind him. The door slammed shut. He spun around. The door was gone. Just solid wall. Heart pounding, Ethan backed toward the center of the room. He could feel it now, something watching him. The air was heavy, suffocating, pressing in like unseen hands on his chest. One by one, the desks began to scrape across the floor, slowly, deliberately moving. Closer to him, Ethan's breath caught in his throat. A low moan rose from the shadows. Then another, and another. He turned, and his stomach lurched. Shapes were emerging from the walls, blackened figures. Their skin blistered and peeling, their eyes hollow pits. They dragged themselves into the room, their mouths open in silent screams. Students, dozens of them, burned, twisted, broken. One figure stepped forward, girl with half her face melted away, teeth exposed through the charred flesh. She clutched an exam booklet in her skeletal hand. She dropped it at Ethan's feet. His eyes fell to the cover. State Entrance, EXAM, April 15th, 1997. The pages inside were fused together, edges blackened by fire, but scrawled across the front. In smears of ash and blood were words that made his blood run cold. Finish the test, or join us forever. Ethan stumbled back, but the burned students closed in, their moans rising to a deafening wail. He spun around desperately for a way out when suddenly, a voice rang out from behind him. Hey, you spo. A beam of light cut through the dark. Ethan shielded his eyes. A figure stood in the doorway that had reappeared, a man in a janitor's uniform, holding a flashlight. Kid, what the hell are you doing in here? The man barked. Ethan's knees buckled in relief. He staggered toward the light. But when he looked back, the room was empty. No burned students, no blood, just dust and silence. The janitor grabbed his arm, yanking him into the hallway. You deaf or what? This section of the school's been sealed for years. Nobody's allowed in here. Ethan struggled to catch his breath. There were people, students, they were burning. The janitor cut him off with a hard glare. His flashlight beam trembled slightly in his hand. Don't, he said, his voice low. Don't talk about them. What are you talking about? Ethan demanded. The janitor leaned close, his breath hot against Ethan's ear. They don't like it when you talk about them. Before Ethan could respond, the hallway lights went out again, and from the darkness, the whispers returned. Then before. Join us, join us, join us. The janitor's grip tightened on Ethan's arm. Run, he hissed. Run, now. The janitor's grip was iron as he dragged Ethan down the hallway. Their footsteps echoed against the concrete, swallowed by the whispers pressing in from all sides. Join us. Stay forever. Ethan's heart hammered, so hard he thought it might burst. He stumbled to keep up, nearly tripping over loose tiles. Where are we going? Ethan gasped. Out, the janitor snapped. Before they realize you don't belong, they rounded a corner, passing door after door, most locked, some broken, their windows spiderwebbed with cracks. The air smelled stronger now, smoke, faint but unmistakable, as though the building itself still remembered burning. Finally, they reached a metal door at the end of the corridor. The janitor shoved it open, and a rush of cool night air hit Ethan's face. He hadn't realized it, but hours must have passed. The sky outside was dark, the moon hanging low and pale above the parking lot. Ethan collapsed against the railing of the stairwell, sucking in air. His lungs burned as if he had been choking on smoke. The janitor slammed the door shut behind them and stood there, his broad shoulders heaving. His face was worn, lined with years of exhaustion, his gray uniform stained with grease and dust. A name tag hung crookedly from his chest. D. Harper. Ethan steadied himself. What the hell was that? Harper's eyes flicked toward him, sharp and weary. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, in a low voice, he muttered, You weren't supposed to see it. See what? Ethan's voice cracked. I was just taking my exam, and then Harper cut him off. That wasn't your exam, Ethan. Froze out. The janitor turned away, fishing a pack of cigarettes from his breast pocket. He lit one with trembling hands and exhaled a thin stream of smoke into the night. That was their exam. There, Ethan asked. Harper gave a bitter laugh, though there was no humor in it. The class of '97. Ethan's skin prickled. What happened to them? Harper looked out over the parking lot, his cigarette glowing faintly in the dark. April 15th, 1997. Final exams were being held in the West Wing gymnasium. Place was overcrowded, wiring shot to hell, and some idiot kid thought it'd be funny to set off firecrackers to stall the test. But the curtains caught fire. Within minutes the whole room was an inferno. Ethan swallowed hard, the images flashing in his mind. Desks, smoke, charred faces. Harper continued, his voice low and grave. 43 students, 1 teacher, all burned alive. They say the flames spread so fast that most didn't even make it out of their seats. By the time the fire department showed up, it was too late. The wind howled across the lot. Ethan shivered. And ever since then, Harper said, this place hasn't been right. Kids say they hear voices in the halls. Teachers swear they see shadows move. But the worst of it, the exam. Every few years, someone gets pulled in, like you did tonight. They sit down for a test that doesn't exist, and if they don't get out... His voice trailed off. Ethan's stomach dropped. What happens? Harper looked at him, his eyes dark. They never leave. The silence that followed was unbearable. Ethan hugged himself, trying to process it. Why me? Why this year? Harper shook his head. I don't know. Nobody ever does. But you're lucky I found you when I did. He flicked his cigarette to the ground, crushing it under his boot. Most kids, they don't make it out. Ethan's mind raced. Everything felt unreal. His exam paper disappearing, the clock stuck at 9:45, the burned students. Mrs. Kearns tearing off her face. Was it all connected to this fire? His hands shook. I don't understand. If this happened years ago, why is the school even open? Harper snorted. Money. Politics. People forget fast when there's profit involved. They sealed off the West Wing, told the parents it was an accident, and moved on. New coats of paint, new textbooks, fresh smiles for the photos. But the truth doesn't go away that easy. Ethan opened his mouth to reply when he noticed something. Through the chain-link fence surrounding the parking lot, a figure stood. It was barely visible in the moonlight, tall, thin, unmoving. Watching, Ethan's breath caught. Mr. Harper, someone's out there. The janitor followed his gaze. His cigarette slipped from his fingers. The figure stepped closer. It was a student, or what was left of one. Its uniform was scorched and blackened, patches of flesh hanging loose from bone. Its eyes glowed faintly red, and in its skeletal hand, it clutched a melted exam booklet. Ethan staggered back. More figures emerged from the shadows. 10, 20, 30 of them. All burned, all silent, all staring straight at him. Harper grabbed Ethan's arm. His voice was low, urgent, trembling. They know you're not finished. The gate rattled violently as the burned students pressed against it, their bony fingers clutching the metal. Their moans rose into a single horrific wail that echoed across the lot. Ethan covered his ears, heart slamming against his ribs. The wail grew louder. The ground trembled. And then, with a metallic shriek, the gate burst open. The students began to pour through. Harper shoved Ethan toward the stairwell. Run! The roar of collapsing metal echoed through the night as the gate ripped off its hinges. The burned students surged forward like a wave of ash and bone. Their hollow eyes glowed faintly in the dark, their scorched mouths opening and closing without sound until, all at once, the silence broke into a chorus of wails. The sound wasn't just noise. It pierced Ethan's skull, drilling into his thoughts like claws, scraping the inside of his brain. He stumbled, clutching his head. Move, Harper barked. shoving him toward the stairwell. Ethan's legs kicked into motion, adrenaline flooding his veins. He bolted down the stairs 2 at a time, Harper close behind, their footsteps thundering in the empty lot behind them. The spirits poured through the shattered gate. Some moved in jerking, spasmodic bursts, others gliding unnaturally fast across the asphalt, their charred limbs dragging as they closed the distance. One girl's jaw dangled from her face by thin strands of flesh, swinging like a pendulum as she ran. Another boy had no legs, but crawled across the pavement with horrifying speed. His burnt hands slapping the ground, Ethan and Harper tore across the lot, aiming for the side entrance of the main building. But the spirits were faster. One burst from the shadows directly in front of them, blocking the path. Its torso was charred completely black, ribs poking through melted skin. In its hand it held a pencil, its tip glistening like a blade. It lunged. Harper yanked Ethan aside, and the creature's pencil stabbed into the brick wall, snapping in half. The sound it made wasn't a scream, but the shriek of fire roaring through timber. Harper shoved Ethan forward. "Don't stop." They reached the side door. Harper slammed it open, practically hurling Ethan inside before slamming it shut behind them. The hallway beyond was dark, the overhead lights dead. Their breathing echoed loudly against the walls. Ethan leaned against the lockers, chest heaving, sweat dripping down his temples. Harper pulled out a ring of heavy keys and locked the door with shaking hands. "That won't hold them long," he muttered. Ethan's voice was barely a whisper. "What do they want from me?" Harper's eyes glinted in the darkness. "You already know." Ethan shook his head furiously. "No, I don't. I was just here to take my test." Harper stepped closer, gripping his shoulder. "That's exactly it. The exam. You started it, didn't you?" Ethan's throat tightened. I wrote a few answers. "Then you're theirs now," Harper said grimly. "Once you begin their exam, you're bound to it. And if you don't finish..." A thunderous bang cut him off. The side door rattled on its hinges. Something slammed into it again, harder this time. The walls trembled. The spirits were coming. Harper yanked Ethan down the hallway, fumbling with his flashlight. The beam flickered to life, cutting through the dark. The corridor stretched to hedgerows of classroom doors, some open, some closed. The smell of smoke was stronger here, thick and choking. They ran, footsteps echoing, breath ragged. The pounding on the door grew louder behind them, then stopped. Silence. Ethan slowed, chest heaving. Did they leave? Harper didn't answer. His flashlight beam shook slightly as he scanned the hall. No, they're already inside. Ethan's stomach dropped. A sound echoed ahead of them, a desk dragging slowly across the floor. Then another sound behind them, a wet, slapping crawl. Ethan spun, and his blood turned to ice. From the darkness behind, one of the burned students crawled into view, the legless boy he had seen earlier. His hand slapped the tiles as he dragged himself closer, his hollow eyes fixed on Ethan. Harper yanked him forward. This way. They sprinted, turning down a narrower hallway. Ethan's lungs screamed for air. His ankle burned as though the ghostly grip still held it. Halfway down the corridor, Harper shoved open a door, and they stumbled into what looked like an old storage room, shelves stacked with boxes, broken chairs, and dusty equipment. Harper slammed the door and jammed a rusted mop handle against the knob, barricading it. Both of them collapsed against the shelves, gasping. For a moment, silence, only their breathing. Then scratching from the other side of the door. Nails dragged slowly across the wood, long, deliberate, like someone spelling something out. Ethan's skin crawled. He leaned close to the door and froze. The scratching wasn't random. It was letters. FINISHTHETES. Ethan stumbled back, nearly knocking over a box. His voice cracked. They know I'm here. They know my name. They know. A hand clamped over his mouth. Harper's eyes blazed in the flashlight beam. Quiet. Don't give them more. Ethan trembled beneath the grip, nodding. Harper slowly pulled his hand away. The scratching stopped, but then from inside the storage room another sound, a soft thump. Something moved in the shadows between the shelves. Ethan froze. His throat went dry. Slowly, he turned his head at the far end of the room. Behind stacks of dusty boxes stood a desk. An exam paper lay neatly on top, its pages stark white in the darkness. Next to it, a chair scraped back as if someone had just stood up. Harper cursed under his breath. "Damn it, they put it here too," Ethan whispered, voice trembling. "What do I do?" The flashlight flickered. For a second, the room plunged into darkness, and in that single instant, Ethan swore he saw someone sitting at the desk, a burned, skeletal figure hunched over the paper, staring at him with hollow eyes. When the light returned, the chair was empty. The paper waited, and across its first page, in jagged black letters, was written, Question 6. The room was silent, silent in a way that pressed against Ethan's ears, making his own breathing sound deafening. The exam paper on the desk waited, its edges too crisp, too white, as if untouched by dust or time. Yet the words across the top, Question 6, seemed to writhe, ink bleeding outward like veins on skin. Ethan shook his head. "I'm not touching that." Harper's voice was hoarse, desperate. "If you don't, they won't stop. They'll tear through this door. They'll tear through you. No." Ethan backed up, hands trembling. "This is insane. It's just paper, it's not real." The scratching began again, this time from inside the walls. Long, angry claws dragging from ceiling to floor. The shelves rattled. Dust fell from above, and then came the whispers. Not from behind the door, but all around them, circling like vultures. Voices overlapping, chanting, echoing. "Finish the test. Finish the test. Finish the test." Ethan clamped his hands over his ears, but it didn't help. The whispers burrowed into his skull, vibrating inside his bones. Harper gripped his arm. His eyes burned with urgency. "You've already started. They won't let you go unless you finish. That's the rule. You answer, you survive." Ethan stared at him, horrified. "And if I fail?" Harper's silence was answer enough. The whispers grew louder, becoming screams. The shelves toppled, boxes spilling onto the floor. The door began to buckle inward under unseen blows. Wood, splintering. Ethan's chest heaved. His legs felt like lead as he stepped toward the desk. The chair creaked when he pulled it out. He sat. The paper's surface shimmered faintly, as if reflecting flames. His hands hovered over it, trembling. The words rearranged themselves, letters bleeding into new shapes. Question 6. Where were you when the fire started? Ethan blinked. His penguin, had it appeared in his hand, tapped against the paper. "I wasn't even born," he whispered, but his hand began to move on its own. The pen scratched violently, ink spilling across the page. Words formed without his control. "I was in the back row. I smelled smoke before anyone else. I tried to scream, but the heat stole my breath." Ethan jerked, trying to stop, but the pen carved the words deeper, cutting into the paper until it tore. His vision blurred. The storage room fading, and then he wasn't in the storage room anymore. He was there, the gymnasium. April 15th, 1997. Heat slammed into him like a wall. Flames curled up the curtains, spreading across the ceiling. Students screamed, pounding against locked doors. The air was black with smoke, thick, choking, blinding. Ethan gagged, stumbling, his lungs burning. He looked down, his hands smaller, thinner, a different body, someone else's memory. He tried to scream, but only a hoarse cough came out. Beside him, a boy with half-melted glasses clawed at the door, his skin blistering from the heat. Another student collapsed, flames consuming her uniform as she writhed. On the floor, Ethan's eyes darted everywhere, desperate. The sound of fire roared like an endless scream. Through the haze, he saw the exam papers still on the desks, some already turning to ash dot, and in the middle of it all, one student sat perfectly still, a girl with black hair, her face already half burned. She clutched her exam booklet to her chest, rocking back and forth as the fire consumed her. Her lips moved silently, repeating the same phrase over and over. Finish the test. Finish the test. Finish the test. Ethan staggered toward her, but the flames surged higher. The ceiling beams groaned, splitting apart. A wall collapsed with a deafening crash, and then he was back. The storage room reformed around him, cold and dark, but sweat poured down his body. His lungs still ached, his throat raw as if he had breathed in real smoke. Harper knelt beside him, shaking his shoulder. "Ethan, hey, wake up." Ethan blinked wildly, gasping. The exam paper was still in front of him. Question 6 was neatly written, his handwriting scrawled across the lines. "I was in the back row. I smelled smoke before anyone else." Ethan shoved the paper away, horrified. "That wasn't me. That wasn't me." Harper's face was pale, grim. "They're making you live it. The fire, piece by piece. It's their exam now. It's your exam too." Ethan's breath came fast, ragged. "Why me? Why are they doing this to me?" Before Harper could answer, the paper shifted again. Question 7. Why didn't you escape? The whispers swelled to a deafening roar. The storage room lights flickered violently. The shelves rattled. The barricaded door buckled as blackened hands pushed through the cracks, fingers curling toward him. Harper yanked him upright. His voice was ragged. "They won't stop until you finish." Ethan's voice broke into a scream. "I'm not one of them." But the exam paper on the desk pulsed like a living thing, ink bleeding across the page until the words seemed to sear themselves into his vision. Question 7. Why didn't you escape? The door finally gave way with a thunderous crash. The burned students poured in, and every single one of them whispered in unison, their charred jaws working in rhythm, eyes glowing like coals. "Answer the question." The storage room erupted with chaos. The barricade splintered apart, wood shards exploding across the floor. The burned students flooded in ash streaked, twisted figures crawling, stumbling, dragging themselves forward, their hollow eyes locked onto Ethan, their mouths whispering in perfect unison, "Answer the question. Answer the question. Answer the question." Harper shoved Ethan behind him, swinging the rusted mop handle like a spear. He jabbed one of the spirits in the chest. The figure staggered, but instead of falling, it shrieked and split down the middle, peeling apart like paper burned at both ends. Ash and flame rained down, but more pushed through. "Ethan, focus," Harper barked. "The exam. They won't stop until you answer." Ethan's back slammed against the desk. The exam paper still sat there, pulsing like a living organ. The words on the page glowed faintly. Question 7. Why didn't you escape? Ethan shook his head, tears burning his eyes. "I don't know. I don't know." The whispers grew louder, shrill, nearly splitting his skull. His vision blurred. The room tilted, and then he was gone again. The gymnasium returned. Only this time, it was worse. The fire was everywhere now, walls caving inward, windows bursting in fiery explosions. Students screamed, their skin melting like wax as they clawed at doors that wouldn't open. Ethan stumbled through the smoke, coughing, choking, eyes stinging. He knew this wasn't real, but the heat seared his flesh, blistering his skin as if it were. He looked down, his body again. It wasn't his own. His arms were scorched, his shirt half burned. He was someone else, and all around him, the voices you could have escaped. You had time, you stayed. Ethan spun, panicked. No, that wasn't me. I wasn't here. Through the haze, he saw them. A group of students pressed against the double doors, screaming for help. The doors bulged outward, as fists pounded from the other side. Teachers, firefighters, someone trying to break through. The gap was there. Escape was possible, and yet he didn't move. The body he was inside refused to budge. His legs locked. His gaze shifted toward the desks, where the charred exam papers still sat, curling in the flames. His own hands reached for them, clutching the booklet even as smoke tore into his lungs. "No," Ethan whispered, tears streaming down his face. "Stop. Please stop." But the memory, no, the truth forced itself onto him. He didn't escape because he refused to leave the test. Unfinished, the flames surged higher. The ceiling cracked open, collapsing in a shower of burning debris. The last thing Ethan saw was a reflection of himself in a broken shard of glass. But it wasn't him, it was a student in a scorched uniform, eyes wide with terror, clutching his exam booklet to his chest. And then everything went black. Ethan gasped awake, collapsing to the floor of the storage room. His throat burned as if filled with smoke. His arms trembled violently, skin raw with phantom burns. The exam paper in front of him was filled in. His handwriting scrawled across the lines. "I didn't escape because the test wasn't finished." Ethan scrambled back, shaking his head. "No, that wasn't me. That wasn't me." But Harper's face said everything. Pale, ashen. "They've chosen you," Harper whispered. "They're binding your soul to theirs. The more questions you answer, the less you'll belong to yourself." Ethan's chest tightened. "But why me? I wasn't even born when this happened." Harper opened his mouth, but froze. His eyes darted past Ethan. Slowly, Ethan turned. At the back of the storage room, shadows deepened into a shape. A figure stood in the corner, tall and thin, its face completely blackened. Its eyes burned faintly red, brighter than the others. It stepped forward, each movement jerking like a puppet pulled by invisible strings. The other burned students recoiled, whispering, backing away as if terrified of it. Ethan's stomach dropped. "What? What is that?" Harper's voice was barely a breath. "Not just another student. That's the one who started the fire." The figure's jaw cracked open with a sickening snap. From the blackened hole came a voice, distorted and layered, like dozens of voices speaking at once. Question 8. The exam paper shifted again. The words smeared, rearranging into a new line of text. Question 8. Who do you belong to? The whispers died away. The spirits stood frozen, silent. All eyes turned to Ethan. The blackened figure took another step forward, its charred skin peeling away, revealing teeth that glowed like hot coals. Ethan backed into Harper, trembling. "I'm not answering that." The figure tilted its head, and for the first time, Ethan realized the exam wasn't just about the fire, it was about him. The silence pressed down heavy, like the air before a storm. The blackened figure stood only feet away now, its charred skin crackling faintly, embers glowing deep in the cracks of its face. Behind it, the burned students stayed perfectly still, their whispers smothered, as if even they feared what might come next. Ethan stared at the exam paper. The words pulsed in thick black ink. Question 8. Who do you belong to? His hands trembled. I don't belong to anyone." The figure twitched. Its head snapped to the side with a sickening crack. From its throat came a horrible, grinding noise, like bones dragged across stone. Harper pulled Ethan back, voice low and urgent. "Don't lie, they'll know. They always know." Ethan's chest tightened. "What does that mean? I don't understand." The lights above them buzzed violently, flickering faster, until they blew out completely. Only the faint glow of burning eyes lit the room, then new voices. Not the students, not the figure. A chorus, deep and layered, filled the storage room. Not whispers this time, but a booming chant that shook the walls. "Your blood, your blood, your blood." Ethan clutched his head. "Stop, please stop." The exam paper shifted again. The letters rearranged themselves, scrawling new words. Your mother sat in the back row. She smelled smoke first. She tried to scream, but she didn't escape either. Ethan froze. His heart stopped cold. No, his voice cracked. No, that's not true. The words pulsed, darker, ink spilling like blood. Her name was Margaret Holloway. She belonged to us, and so do you. Ethan stumbled backward, nearly tripping over a broken shelf. His vision blurred. His mother. She had never spoken of this place, never spoken of the fire. But in the pit of his stomach, he knew it was true. She never made it out, Harper said grimly. The Holloways. They were part of the 97 class. Ethan's voice cracked with desperation. No, she was alive until last year. She raised me. She couldn't have been here. The figure inched closer, its charred mouth opening wider. From within came a hiss that almost sounded like laughter. The exam paper shifted. Again. Question 9. How did she escape the fire? Ethan shook his head violently. I don't know. I wasn't even alive. How could I know that? The burned students began to twitch, jerking toward him with spasmodic movements, their jaws opening too wide. Their whispers started again, rising, overlapping until it was unbearable. She made a deal. She made a deal. She made a deal. Ethan pressed his palms to his ears, but it was no use. The whispers drilled into his skull. Images burned across his vision. His mother young, terrified, trapped in the flames. Her exam booklet clutched to her chest, her lips moving frantically as if reciting answers, even while the fire closed. In dot then dash, another presence. The same blackened figure, stepping from the smoke. It bent close to her, whispering something into her ear. She nodded, trembling, crying, but she nodded, and then she was gone, pulled out of the flames in an instant, while the others burned alive. The memory snapped back into darkness. Ethan collapsed to his knees, gasping. His throat tightened until he could barely breathe. She left them. She made a deal with you. The exam paper filled in the answer without his hand touching it. She escaped because she belonged to us. Ethan's heart thundered in his chest. He tried to rip the page apart, but the paper only regenerated, the words bleeding back into place, no matter how he tore at it. Harper grabbed his shoulders, shaking him. Listen to me. This isn't just about the fire, it's about inheritance, bloodlines. You're tied to them because your mother was tied to them. Ethan's eyes filled with tears. So what? I'm cursed because she made a deal. I'm supposed to die for something I didn't do. The figure loomed over him, bending low, its ember eyes burning into his dot. The exam paper shifted one final time. Question 10. Will you finish what she started? The storage room shook violently, shelves toppling, ceiling tiles falling in clouds of dust. The burned students surged closer, but none dared touch him, not yet. They waited. The figure's mouth cracked open wider and wider until its jaw unhinged completely, revealing a black abyss inside. The whisper of 1,000 voices poured from that void. Answer the question. The world seemed to tilt. The storage room stretched wider, longer, the walls bending like wet paper. Ethan clutched the exam booklet, knuckles white, his breath ragged. The blackened figure loomed above him, its ember eyes fixed on his soul. Behind it, the burned students waited motionless, whispering softly, as if chanting in prayer. Question 10. Will you finish what she started? The words bled across the page, dripping black ink that pooled on the desk. The ink writhed, slithering like veins, reaching for Ethan's trembling hands. I won't, Ethan choked out. I don't belong to you. The figure snapped its head toward him with an insect-like crack. The temperature in the room plummeted. The burned students jolted violently, their mouths tearing wider. From every throat came the same scream, lie. The floor buckled. The shelves collapsed inward. And suddenly Ethan wasn't in the storage room anymore. He stood in a long hallway lined with lockers, but the metal doors were warped, melted, dripping like candle wax. The fluorescent lights flickered and bled. Red dot at the far end of the hall. He saw her, his mother, Margaret, younger, alive, her clothes singed, her face streaked with soot. She clutched her exam booklet tight to her chest. "Mom," Ethan whispered, stumbling forward. She turned to him, eyes wet with terror. "You can't run, Ethan. Not from them. I tried. I begged. I thought I'd escaped. But they always collect their due." Her voice trembled as she reached out a shaking hand. "They spared me, so you would pay later." Ethan froze, the words stabbing through him like knives. You knew. All this time, you knew." Tears streamed down her face. "I tried to protect you. I thought I had more time. But the debt doesn't vanish. It just waits." The lockers behind her slammed open all at once. Burned hands shot out, clawing at the air, pulling themselves into the hallway. The blackened figure emerged last, ducking its head under the warped ceiling. It spoke with her voice this time. "Finish what she started. Sign the final answer. Bind yourself, and we'll let you live." The exam paper appeared in his hands again, its pages swollen, covered in smeared ash and blood. Only one blank space remained at the bottom. Waisunathan's pulse hammered in his ears. His vision swam. If he circled yes, he knew what it meant. He would inherit his mother's deal. Bound to the class of '97 forever, his soul chained to the fire. If he circled no, he suspected the result would be worse. The students weren't looking for defiance, they wanted compliance. Rejection might mean being consumed outright, erased from existence. "Harper!" Ethan screamed, spinning, but Harper wasn't there. The hallway was empty, except for him, his mother, and the horrors closing in. Margaret's trembling hand pressed to his cheek. "Ethan, please. It's the only way. I couldn't carry the burden. You're stronger than I was. Just finish it." He shook his head violently, backing away. "No, I'm not doing this. I won't live chained to you, or them." Her face twisted. The fear melted into fury. Her skin blackened, burning away until she was no longer his mother at all, just another one of them, ash-skinned and hollow-eyed. The burned hands grabbed at him, dragging him toward the paper. His own hand moved against his will, the pen pressing to the page. "No, stop. It's not my choice," Ethan screamed. The pen scratched down. The answer was written. He looked down and froze. He hadn't written yes or no. He had written a third word, in jagged letters across the page: "mine." The hallway shook violently. The burned students screamed, staggering back as if struck by invisible force. The blackened figure roared, its ember eyes blazing brighter. The exam booklet writhed in Ethan's hands, smoking, the pages curling into flames. His voice tore from his throat, deeper, harsher than his own. "I don't belong to you. I don't belong to her. I belong to me." The booklet burst into fire, exploding in a wave of heat and smoke. The burned students shrieked, their bodies unraveling into ash. The hallway split apart, walls crumbling into endless black. The blackened figure staggered forward, its jaw unhinged, voice booming with rage. "You dare break the contract." The floor gave way beneath Ethan's feet. He plummeted into the dark, the echo of screams swirling around him, and as he fell, the exam booklet reappeared in his hands, charred, burned, but still alive. The last page turned itself over, revealing new text. Final question. If you belong to no one, then who will burn for you? Ethan hit the ground with a bone-jarring thud. For a moment he thought he'd died. No pain, just silence. Then came the sound, crackle, hiss, crackle. The smell of smoke swelled around him. He opened his eyes. He was back in the exam hall, but this wasn't the same scorched classroom he'd seen before. It was something older, something primal. The walls were blackened bone, the ceiling a canopy of charred flesh that pulsed and twitched. The desks had fused into one massive shape in the center of the room, an altar made from melted wood and twisted metal, and on it lay Harper. Her wrists and ankles were bound with wires that cut into her skin. Her face was pale, her lips trembling, eyes wide with terror. "Ethan," she croaked, smoke curling from her mouth. Don't let it take me." The burned students surrounded the altar in perfect silence, their bodies now skeletal, their hollow sockets glowing faintly like dying coals. The blackened figure stepped forward, its ember eyes searing into Ethan. "You rejected the deal," it thundered, "but the fire must feed. The contract does not break, it shifts. One soul for another. She burns, or you burn." The exam booklet flared back into Ethan's hands. The final page glowed red, the words seared into the paper. "Final question, who will burn for you?" Below were only two spaces. Ethan Marsharper, STOA. His pen bled molten ink, sizzling with heat. His fingers shook. "No," Ethan whispered, backing away. "I won't choose. I won't kill her." The burned students hissed in unison. The blackened figure tilted its head, almost amused. "Then you both burn." The walls ignited. The ceiling dropped flaming pieces of flesh that slapped wetly against the floor, bursting into sparks. Harper screamed, thrashing violently against her restraints. The wires tightened, burning into her skin. "Ethan, please," she begged. "Don't let them take Mead. Don't let me die here." His chest clenched. His whole body screamed to run, but there was nowhere left to go. The fire was a living thing now, circling closer, licking his skin. He looked at Harper. Her eyes were glassy, desperate, full of a trust that stabbed him deeper than any blade. And then he remembered his mother, her voice, whispering through smoke. "They spared me so you would pay later." The truth slammed into him. His life, his birth, his survival, it had all been purchased with fire. His mother's deal hadn't protected him. It had damned him. Ethan gritted his teeth, clutching the booklet tight. "No, you don't get to choose for me. You don't get to bind me to your game." He raised the pen, his hand shaking violently. The students leaned forward. The blackened figure loomed, expectant. Harper sobbed, thrashing against the wires. He pressed the pen down and carved a third name. The letter scorched into the paper. Jagged, defiant, the fire. For a heartbeat, the world stopped. Then the exam hall convulsed. The burned students screeched, staggering backward. The blackened figure's embers flared, its body splitting down the middle as molten cracks tore across its charred flesh. The flames surged upward, writhing into a shape far bigger than the figure itself, a crown of fire, a face made of endless heat, eyes like burning suns. The fire had always been the true master. It laughed, a sound like explosions ripping through bone. At last, unbound, "I am the answer." The blackened figure fell to its knees, consumed in its own flames, howling as it was devoured by the greater force. The skeletal students burst like fireworks, raining ash across the altar. The fire bent low over Ethan, its blazing maw stretching wide. "You offer me myself, and so I take everything." The altar split apart. Harper's bindings burned away, but instead of freeing her, the wires slithered back into her flesh, rooting deep, fusing her body with the burning wood. She screamed, her skin cracking with lines of glowing orange. "No," Ethan roared, lunging toward her. The fire lashed out, throwing him across the room. His body slammed into the wall, agony jolting through his bones. Harper's eyes rolled back. Her body convulsed as fire filled her veins, her mouth opening in a soundless shriek. Her hair ignited, her chest splitting open with blazing light. The fire was claiming her, not as a sacrifice, but as a vessel. Ethan staggered to his feet, vision blurred, smoke choking him. Harper's body rose slowly above the altar, flames pouring from her mouth. Her eyes now pits of fire. The voice of the inferno thundered through her lips. "The contract is reborn, through her. I walk again. Ethan froze, horror flooding him. He hadn't saved Harper. He hadn't damned himself. He had given the fire a new host. The exam hall melted into a cathedral of fire. The walls were gone, the ceiling gone, only endless flame that roared like an ocean. Ash swirled in choking storms. The floor trembled, as if it would give way at any moment. At the center floated Harper. Her body was no longer fully hers. Her skin blistered, cracked, and burned from within. Flames pulsed under her flesh like veins of lava. Her hair streamed upward, a crown of living fire. Her voice echoed with something greater, something ancient. I am the fire. I am the test. Through her, I endure. Ethan coughed, dragging himself to his feet, every nerve screaming. Harper, fight it. You're stronger than this. For a flicker, her real voice surfaced. Ethan, her eyes softened. Tears sizzled on her burning cheeks. Run. Then the fire swallowed her again. She descended from the altar, every step cracking the ground. The burned students' ashes swirled back together, reforming into charred silhouettes that bowed to her. The exam booklet flared open in Ethan's hands one last time. The pages blazed, melting as a single, final line carved itself into existence. Extra. Credit. How do you end the fire? The pen dripped molten ink. His pulse pounded. There was no yes or no. No names. No choices. This was it. The fire. Harper raised her hand. Flame surged toward him like a tidal wave. Ethan dove aside, the blast scorching the ground where he stood. Desks and chairs vaporized instantly. He stumbled forward, clutching the pen and paper. His mind spun. How do you end the fire? How? He remembered his mother's voice. I thought I had more time. He remembered the burned students. You belong to us. He remembered Harper. Terrified. Don't let them take me. It all led here. The fire wasn't just a haunting. It was hunger, bound by contracts, living through names written on pages. It didn't consume randomly. It consumed when given permission. So what if he didn't feed it? What if he didn't obey its rules at all? Ethan gripped the pen so hard it cut into his skin. He bent over the paper, flames licking closer, heat blistering his flesh. His vision blurred, but he forced the letters out, jagged and raw. No, answer, the paper screamed. Not burned, screamed. A shrill, piercing sound, like thousands of voices wailing at once. The flames around him staggered, guttering like a candle. In wind, Harper shrieked, her body convulsing as the fire inside her thrashed. Her eyes flickered, flame to human, human to flame. You cannot refuse the question. The inferno bellowed. Yes, Ethan rasped, stepping forward despite the heat blistering his skin. I can. Because without me, without anyone answering you, starve. The booklet caught fire in his hands, curling, folding, turning to ash. But instead of being consumed, Ethan dropped it into the ground like an offering. The floor cracked open. The fire howled, its vessel thrashing, flames ripping from Harper's mouth and chest. She fell to her knees, clawing at the air as the inferno tried to rip free. The burned students collapsed into dust, shrieking as they scattered into nothing. The fire surged higher, ripping free from Harper in a towering storm, a living column of flame. I will not end. I will find another. Ethan staggered closer to Harper, shielding her frail body with his own. His voice tore out, ragged, defiant. Then take me. But you don't get her. The fire roared. It lunged downward like a collapsing star. Ethan threw his arms around Harper and the world exploded silence when Ethan opened his eyes. He was lying on the cold floor of the real high school hallway. The lights buzzed faintly. The smell of burned plastic lingered. Harper coughed weakly beside him, alive. Her skin singed, but her eyes her own. The exam booklet lay between them. Nothing but ash dot. She looked at him, trembling. Did we stop? It. Ethan stared at the blackened smear where the booklet had been. No, he whispered. We didn't stop it. We just denied it. For now, a faint sound rose in the distance. Not fire, not screams. Paper. The rustling of countless pages. Somewhere, just out of sight. Harper gripped his hand tight. Ethan, he didn't answer. He knew the truth. The fire hadn't died. It was waiting, watching, and someday soon, it would find another exam to give.